All right, so here we go. Here comes handsy Uncle Joseph. This is The Hill reporting. They say, former Vice President Joe Biden has surged in the polls since launching his bid for the Democratic presidential nomination, opening up a double-digit lead over the rest of the field in two national surveys. What? A CNN poll released Tuesday found Biden jumping 11 points to 39% support, a 24-point lead over Senator Bernie Sanders, who is at 15% support. No other candidate in the race has double-digit backing from respondents. And a Morning Consult survey released Tuesday found Biden with 36% support, followed by Sanders at 22%. That's a 6-point bounce for Biden from the same survey released earlier this month, while Sanders has fallen by 2 points. No other candidate reaches double-digit support in the Morning Consult poll either. Biden's polling strength also extends to the first-in-the-nation primary state of New Hampshire. A Suffolk University survey released Tuesday found the former Delaware senator in the lead in New Hampshire with 20% support, followed by Sanders and South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg at 12%. Senator Elizabeth Warren is in fourth place at 8%. So let's be clear about this. This is largely nonsense. Now, here's why this is nonsense. Again, you go to the methodology of the poll. I mean, we're talking a 24-point lead over Bernie Sanders. 24-point lead. Now, there's a general rule in polling. When you get something called an outlier, you can usually dismiss it. In other words, the outlier is not indicative of the reality of the situation because the trend is, not that extreme. So you can dismiss the extreme one because that's an outlier and it doesn't really describe the reality of the situation. So when we talk about a 24-point lead, I don't care how much somebody might dislike Bernie Sanders, you have to acknowledge this is way outside of what all the other polls are. All the other polls show either Bernie leading or, in some instances, Biden being a little bit up, but nowhere near 24 percentage points. So why is this? Well, of course, everybody on Twitter did what they should have done, which is they dug into the methodology of this CNN poll. And one of the things that they've done in the past that, skews the poll against Bernie is that they undersample younger voters because Bernie Sanders support overwhelmingly comes from younger voters. And in any election where Bernie Sanders is going to be the victor, there's going to be a massive turnout of younger voters. So when you're doing polling and you're not accommodating for that, well, then that's misleading by its very nature. It's like saying, let's do a poll, but let's omit the strongest base of support for one of the two candidates. Why would you do that? Imagine looking at a poll that's all young people and very few old people. You know what that would be? That would be Bernie Sanders by more than 24 points. He would overwhelmingly crush everybody in sight. But this poll was even worse because apparently the sample size of younger voters, but not just, the millennials, but this was like millennials and Gen Xers were mostly, not used in this poll. So the overwhelming majority of them were, I think, over 65. What? Obviously, the older you go with the candidates, the more they're going to support the status quo politicians. That's always been the case. The older you go, the more pro-establishment they are. And, and also the more name recognition is super important. So, yeah, this poll was crafted in a way to 100% put Biden in the lead by 1.5 miles. But this is what we see, guys. This is a fucking trend. The trend is totally oversample older voters because those are the people who are, most likely to not be pro-Bernie. And it happens time and time again. Now, I will say this, though. I do also think Biden got a bump from when he announced. I do think that there was definitely an uptick in support for him when he officially launched. Now, it is also true they oversampled older voters, but I think that there's still plenty of evidence and plenty of reason to believe he did see a bump. And so there is an argument that even putting this outlier poll aside, putting these two outlier polls aside, he could still be in the lead. Now, the lead might be 3 or 4 points, but that's a lead nonetheless. So I honestly have mixed feelings about this because I'm still standing by my prediction of Biden's going to tank in the polls, and I think he's going to tank relatively quickly. In other words, before the first votes are cast. That's what I mean by relatively quickly. Before the Iowa caucus. And, what's the catalyst for it? I don't know. It could be when Biden shoves his foot in his mouth 8,000 times, as he's inevitably going to do. But, again, the media likes him, so perhaps they're not going to cover the negative stuff, in such a forthright way where it's obvious to everybody that he's shoving his foot in his mouth. So maybe it's not the media coverage that makes him tank. But I certainly think that, by the debates and when we see 2 or 3 debates, that there's no way he's still going to be the front runner after that. Because even though Biden's a good debater, he is staking positions that are comical in the year 2019. Like, he's openly arguing against Medicare for all and for a public option. Yesterday, he just came out and supported Donald Trump and John Bolton's neocon regime change coup in Venezuela. You're running for the Democratic nomination for president, and you're arguing that neocons are right and we should do more regime change? Are you fucking crazy? But the answer is no. He's being calculated in the sense that he wants to be the centrist guy because Bernie's got that left lane, down. Well, that's not going to fly anymore. So I do think he's going to tank in the polls. But it is also a fact that he has gotten a bump since announcing, and he very possibly is the front runner. So I think we need to digest that. It's totally fair to talk about how these polls were skewed, but I think it would be a little bit delusional to act like, as of this moment right now, like he's not somewhat competitive with Bernie. I think he is. But then there's also weird shit. I forget whether they're in New Hampshire or Iowa, but Biden did a rally and just pulled a couple hundred people. Bernie did a rally and pulled a couple thousand people. So there's still that thing on the ground of like, you get the sense that Bernie supporters are Bernie supporters, whereas Biden supporters are those casual people who are sitting on the couch who's like, who? Oh, Biden's running? Yeah, I guess. He's from the Obama years. I'll support him. So I think there's a difference in the enthusiasm between the two kinds of supporters. And again, I think the polls are a little skewed by undersampling younger voters, but we need to take all threats here seriously. And I just watched the other day Knock Down the House, which is the documentary on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Cori Bush, Amy Villela, and who was the other Justice Democrat they had in it? I apologize. I'm blanking on it right at this moment. But they basically followed a bunch of... Paula Jean Swearengin running against Joe Manchin. They basically followed the campaigns of these Justice Democrats trying to topple these established candidates. And we all know, how it ended. We won some races, we lost most of our races. But that's par for the course when you're the underdog, and that's par for the course when you're at a monetary disadvantage and you're only taking small dollars and all that stuff. But there is a message of hope I got from that documentary. And that message is, as long as you keep fighting, you're eventually going to win. So, the victory is in the work. The victory is in the, I do a recurring donation to Bernie Sanders. I'm willing to help the campaign however I could possibly help the campaign. And, for all the people who are canvassing for Bernie, who are knocking on doors for Bernie, who are involved on a regular basis, as long as we keep fighting, as long as we keep working, as long as we keep spreading the message, even things like, spreading it online, all that stuff is so important that as long as we keep doing that, I think the future is bright and that we will win. So that documentary gave me hope, but, it's quite a dichotomy and quite a shock to the system to see how awesome the gains are that we've made and how hard everybody worked. But then you look at a poll and it's kind of skewed and it's like Joe Biden is leading by 17 quadrillion points. And you're like, well, fuck that shit. Fuck that shit. And the media is going to play a huge role in this upcoming election because it's hard to tell, man. My original guess was all of the anti-Bernie Sanders coverage is actually going to help Bernie at this point because it actually did that with Trump the last time. All the anti-Bernie stuff, and it just, all the anti-Trump stuff helped him get in the White House. For Bernie, I've seen a lot of the same dynamic. The more they attack him, the stronger he gets. But then it's also the case that, I don't know, maybe the endless positive coverage of the other candidates helps those candidates. So shitting on Bernie might help Bernie, but bolstering the centrists might help the centrists too. That's a weird dynamic. That could be the case, or people can just reject the spoon feeding of centrist candidates to them, and it doesn't help them. But it's also the case that some of the negative coverage of Bernie can hurt Bernie. I definitely think the whole thing about the Boston Marathon bomber voting, I definitely think that hurt Bernie. So, I don't know. There's a lot of different variables to discuss here, but the polls are skewed, but it's also the case that we shouldn't rest easy and act like everything that's anti-Bernie is a conspiracy. We need to take every threat seriously, even though admittedly they're overhyping the threat.